Hi, I'm Allison, and I will be doing the training for IM101. So thank you for joining us today. So some of you have probably been in a couple other sessions. Some of this information might get repeated because we have some people who this is their first session they're joining. So I'm sorry, bear with me. All right, so we'll get started. So to start off, for those of you who don't know, this is the launch of Chungnam 5.0, and with 5.0, really, there's a huge change to Masters. And the biggest change with Masters is there's new modules that are being rolled out. So this one falls under insights into megatrends. And some of the other modules are like art of storytelling, which is focused on storytelling through, there's creative storytelling, there's also visual storytelling. Those are some of the courses that will be rolled out later. There's also like a debate module as well. This one is insights into megatrends. This is really looking into the future, kind of like where we are going into. If you look it up, megatrends, there's a couple of them. There's like the shift in power from west to east is one megatrend. There's another megatrend of technology and climate change and resource scarcity. So we're
Okay.
So this course and this entire module is actually built around those different ideas. This course is built around a couple of those, specifically like climate change and resource scarcity. It's also a little bit in demographic change and rapid urbanization, and you'll see as we go through my program. So this program is called Feeding the Future, and as it implies, it is all about like the food system and how we're going to feed the world as it's getting hotter with climate change, population growth, all of that. So I'll walk through some of this stuff. The objective of this class is really to get students to think about where their food comes from. This is something I think a lot of people don't really think about. We assume food is always there. So the food system is kind of this like big system that we don't consider. And there's a lot of problems with it and how we're going to move forward. So their goal really is to understand this and be able to visualize what's happening with it. Also to really reflect on their personal experiences. What does food mean to them? What role does food play in their life? And also to develop some critical thinking skills to be able to critique this food system. We're going to be thinking about how we move ahead in the future, but to do that, we first have to look back and see where we came from, how we got here, and what the problems are. So those are the main objectives. You'll see those are pretty broad objectives. And so this class is pretty broad in that you can cover a lot of different things. Even if you cover every single topic that is in this specific program, you're never going to get super deep into the food system. We're only scratching the surface. So there is flexibility within each teacher's class to really shape it based on like what the interests of the students are. And I'll show you where in the class you can do that. Okay, so the 3 books in the program are The Omnivore's Dilemma, the Young Readers Edition. This is a pretty classic like food book. It's written by Michael Pollan, and the original one is pretty difficult for students, so I picked the Young Readers Edition. It's a pretty soft start to the term. It's a easy read, pretty interesting, and it'll just let them start thinking about the system as a whole, what the food system means, and different ways we can interact with the food system. Then the next book it goes into is the Monsanto Papers. If you know anything about food system, if you know anything about food, you've probably heard of the company Monsanto. So Monsanto is pretty infamous, and you can't really talk about the food system without talking about them and what has happened with that company. So this book looks into a specific case where Monsanto was sued for their chemical Roundup, which is an herbicide that they use. So the second book looks into this, which is paired with a mock trial unit since it is a court case. So I'll talk about that and how to run that. If you don't have mock trial experience, that is totally fine. It's not actually expected. The purpose of this mock trial is more for them to understand kind of like how the justice system doesn't help the food system always. It's not really about prepping them for a mock trial competition. Okay. And then the last book is The Fate of Food. And this looks into technologies and kind of systems as we move into the future. What can we do to reshape our food system? So ending on a positive note, and this will be paired with their final projects and presentations. So generally the class structure is pretty standard to how other classes run. I'd probably compare this to kind of like a C2 class in the structure. So there's always a reflect, a warm-up time where they're going to just start with a journal writing prompt. There's a review test that starts week 2. I'll talk about the review test after this and show some pictures, but the first part of the actual class is a warm-up journal writing prompt. A lot of the masters actually, if you've taught them, might have a beginning page where they take like a quiz to see if they did their homework, like a reading comprehension quiz. I didn't want to go that route because the point isn't really like, the class is more about thinking and broader questions. So I want them to be thinking about this stuff as they're coming in. And this is also just to help, like you can start this as they're coming into class. Any stragglers, if they're late, they'll just be writing and then they start discussing it. This also makes up the writing prompt. The nice part is it links to their iLearning. So there's something I've heard a lot from students is that like iLearning never has anything to do with what we do in class, which is very true. So instead, what this program, at least, the iLearning has been synced to this big overall question here. They'll start the journal writing. We'll talk about it in class. They'll take notes, think about that, and then they go home. And it's a very similar prompt so that they can finalize their thoughts and put it into like writing. Scout is an introductory exploration. This is not in every class. It usually is when there's a new book, just some introductory discussion about like what we're going to be learning, kind of a preview of this next unit. The next part is dive. So dive is, you can see it's the core part of the class. Dive is where they're going to be doing the reading. We're going to be talking about the book, analysis of the book, see what's actually going on. So there's about 60 minutes, so this should take up the second hour, plus skill theory. So skill theory here is really having them, for the most part, research and learn about further topics in the food system, or it helps them analyze kind of opposing perspectives. So if we're talking about building a new food system and how we're moving ahead into the future, we also have to analyze like, why are all these problems still here? All of these problems exist and they're not like, the system isn't changing for a reason. There must be some reason that like, there must be some plausible reason if we say like, our cows live in these terrible conditions. Like, why is that though? What are some of those arguments that push for why we should keep the system going instead of putting them out into greener pastures, things like that. So though we do talk a lot about like, this is broken, we have to change it, we should also look at, but why is it currently like that? That's really kind of where the skill theory is driving towards. Okay. And then during the mock trial unit, the skill theory turns into a mock trial skill. So to help them prepare for the mock trial. And then last but not least is projects. It follows kind of like the C2 framework of frame, ideate, and materialize for their projects. And then they should present their projects and get feedback. So this will take up the last hour. So like I said, there's a mock trial unit during lesson 9. This is when they're actually running the mock trial. So you'll see the mock trial will take up a good chunk of class. So there is no reading that gets discussed there really. There's not much else. It's just the mock trial preparation and simulation. And then it flips, the conversation and discussion comes at the very end. This reading that happens in this last week, it's really short. It's the verdict of the actual trial. So I don't want them to read it the week before and go into the mock trial knowing like, oh, whatever. So this is also, this will get paired with the discussion on like how the mock trial went and the actual trial, and they can compare. Lesson 13, there's going to be final projects, and final projects are a big, like final presentations are a big part of Kingdom 5.0. I should say warm up. And so because presentations are pretty big, the whole last class is dedicated really to just final presentations, with a final, just like a review of what they've learned, any last thoughts in the last couple minutes after they finish presentations. This is pretty flexible. I found that it really depends on how many students you have. If you have like 3 students, you're not going to need 120 minutes. If you have 5 students, if you have like 12 students, 13 students, you do need to watch your time and make sure you're leaving enough time for final presentations. So this is really up to your discretion. If you only have a couple students, you can give them a little more time to prep or to discuss at the end. Okay. So going back up to the review tests, we'll start from the beginning. Review tests will be happening. This is new for masters. So there are going to be review tests and vocabulary homework for the students. So the review test looks kind of similar to what they currently have. It is the first page is matching, but you can see it's matching English to English. This is because they are masters, they should be able to understand English at a high level, and we want them to be learning synonyms, not just the Korean word. So the first page is matching this, pretty simple. The second page, and all the pages beyond that, should be pages 2 through 5. This is fill in the blank for the students. This is not like the current review tests for the lower levels where they just drag and drop and then they'll click, it'll go in. They actually have to type it in because the word forms may change. So it might be like plural, they might have to change the tense if it's a verb, things like that, which means they have to be super careful. So do remind your students when they type it in, make sure there's no extra periods or spaces, make sure they're not randomly capitalizing things. If there's a dash in the word, the dash has to go in here too. It has to match exactly what the answer is, otherwise they don't get points for it. So do be careful with that. These words are, the review test runs as a preview now. So for masters, it's not really useful if they are just reviewing the words that they learned the week before, because then they never use it again. So not as useful, but we switched it to our preview. So for example, in week 1, their homework on iLearning as they go into week 2 is to study for their vocab. It's actually in their iLearning. So week 1 homework, they study all these words. Those words were selected from their week 2 reading. So as they go home and they're reading their book for lesson 2, the words come from those same lessons. Then when they walk into class in week 2, they take their test. Those words were the ones that they learned on iLearning. Those come from their week 2 reading, and those are the same words that are going to be used in the lesson for that week so that it helps them with the discussion. So this way, their words are actually building up to the discussion. You can use those words in class. They'll help them understand it instead of just a constant review where they don't understand the words. So we won't be providing vocab lists as of right now for students, but again, all of these words are online. They're on their iLearning student portal, so they can find them there. Okay. One. Important notes about this class in particular. So because this is the food system, there are some controversial and some graphic content. The biggest one is probably animal abuse and living conditions. There are tons of videos online about the living conditions of livestock, so cows, pigs, chickens. Be careful when you choose this content. There are videos online that do show people slaughtering chickens, or yeah, exactly. So make sure you're checking out for the gross factor, but also the graphic factor. Make sure it is appropriate for your students before you walk into class. So I highly suggest don't just walk in and look for a video, find one before. The other one is personal experience. This is a very crucial component to this course because we're talking about food. This is something that affects everyone. Everyone eats, everyone has to eat. So everyone has different experiences with it. You might get some people who are vegetarians. You might get some people who have different dietary habits. food is something that is uniquely, personal to each person. So do encourage sharing experiences between students and for the instructor, but be very careful not to extend any moral judgment on people's choices. Like, we are going to be talking about choices. That is a huge part of this course, but we shouldn't be judging each other for them. So remind your students that, like, there's a way to have productive discussion about this without, being mean to each other, without judging each other. Just be respectful. Remind your students to be respectful. So this will look different. This is on our development server, so it'll look different from the actual teacher's portal, but our lessons, you can see some examples of them. So this is lesson 1. Like I said, this is the journal writing. So the students will be able to type in their the responses right here. They can add to it. When they go home, they can actually access their C-learning stuff from their student portal. So they can pull it up and read through it again before they write their iLearning. So this will link over to iLearning. And this is what we've discussed over here. That's the first part. Then these pages will look pretty similar to if you've taught other master classes, the other master classes. There are questions, quotes, different activities to go through for students to facilitate discussion. So you can see there's quite a few dive pages. Dive is where you're going to be doing this discussion. The expectation is not for you to go through all of these dive pages, especially later on in the term. Especially later on in the term. If you look here in our last book, there are different technologies we're going to talk about. Each chapter is really its own little vignette of a different technology or a different system. And there are pages that discuss all of them. If you don't hit all of these during class, that's fine. Let's say your students find fish farms absolutely boring. They don't want to talk about it. You don't have to sit there and move through all those pages. If they're really interested in lab meat and you can spend a good chunk of time really analyzing that, looking at that and that technology, then go for it. There's no expectations to cover all of those pages. It's really there for you to be able to choose from, to be able to help you facilitate discussion in class. But the class is really going to be shaped by what your students want to learn, what they're interested in. Same in week 12, there's 4 different types of technology here and systems. Choose whatever your students are more interested in. This is kind of what the journal writing in the beginning opening discussion is for, to kind of see what they were interested in. If they're I don't care about water, it's not interesting. Okay, super interested in Soylent and 3D food printing, go for it. That's really up to you. At the end of the day, the dive pages are just to really get discussion going, make the students critically think about the food system. Where are we going? Why is it like this? How does it affect us? Things like that. Okay, then explore. This is our skill theory. So like I said, there's research terms. Usually this is a research page, and I give some research terms. You can add more to here if you have a different idea, if you have students who are interested in some other ones. For example, in my lesson 3, we talk about companies. We talk about different companies and their culture, their values that they have. And I list a couple different companies that they can look into. If you have other companies that you're interested in or students are interested in, like Nestle, that's a super interesting one. You can totally add that. That's up to you. So this is for you to kind of build on the knowledge that you're learning on in class in an extension activity. And then the project. So the projects will vary. Some of them are a little bit more long-term. Some are short ones. This is a 1-week one. So their homework, this is the week 2 project. Their homework was actually to document all the meals that they ate during week 1, and then their experiences eating them. Week 2, their project is they're going to trace their food back to its origins. So they're going to, if they ate fruit, right, pineapple, then maybe they're going to try to trace back, where did that pineapple come from? And they can research it. One place that I did find is really useful is if you go to eMart or Home Plus, they actually, if you look for the food, they actually tell you the country of origin. So that was really interesting for a lot of students, and researching like, where do these foods grow? How did they get to this country? So thinking about the ingredients that go into their meal, we can look at the food, like maybe pineapples are in there, there's rice, and there is, spam. So where does it come from? Who are the producers? What kind of transportation is needed? So they should be thinking about like how much work it takes to get the food to them. So this is just the second week project. Third week, if we take a look. So again, it goes through the same process, journal writing. There is a final project, and I'll talk about that. The final project, they're going to be selecting a theme in the beginning of the term, because this project in week 3 and 4 is an opinion editorial. And it should be on the same like theme as their final project, just to help them get the research started. So that way they're thinking about it during this time. So they pick a theme, and then it goes through the lesson. In their project, they're going to be writing an opinion editorial about that theme. So if they want to talk about, animal cruelty, they can write an opinion editorial about this. It'll move through this. Their homework is actually to finish this. So they'll finish this for homework. This is actually their iLearning for that week. Their iLearning prompt is write an opinion editorial about a food topic. It should be the exact same one as this. That way it's not extra homework. They'll finish it for homework. They should print a copy, and then they bring it into class, and you can continue from there. So I'll show you lesson 5 hasn't gone up yet. So this is the mock trial unit, and you'll see, again, the beginning parts are all the same. It goes through quotes, discussion about the book. In the mock trial unit, you can shorten your discussions. There are fewer pages, and then you can go into explore. Maybe there's not fewer pages. You can spend a little more time on explore, because this is where they need the skills for mock trial. So like I said, if you do not have experience in mock trial, that's totally fine. That's not the expectation of this. This is not for them to prepare for the competition. It's not for them to do a formal mock trial. It's really because the book is about a court case that's happening, or that has happened, Monsanto versus someone who got cancer, spraying Roundup. And so it looks into the entire food system and how much corruption there is behind it. A big part of it is how the justice system is also implicated in that, and the entire regulatory system is also implicated there. So it's for them to understand what's happening, to kind of test it out themselves. It's really not for them to understand formalities of mock trial. So if you don't have experience with it, all of the skill pages will cover everything that you will need to know to be able to run a mock trial, and for students to be able to do it too. So this will go through all of what you need to know for a basic mock trial. If you've actually taught a mock trial class, you'll see a lot of things are simplified, a lot of things are taken out, again, because it's not important to the class itself here. If you know how to do that, if your students are also veteran mock trial students, feel free to utilize all of that here. And then all of these pages will help them prepare for it. So understandably, it is difficult to be preparing for this stuff on a tablet, especially if some of the stuff disappears, if they can't take it home and prep. So what I've done is also taken all of the mock trial stuff that you'll need, and it's all in a document, and you can find it on FTP. So all of these documents will be up. The case file is there, so you can print off the case file to give your students, and they should be reading this. They should be going through this. This is where all of the content that's in the STB for the skill theory and for the project part where they're prepping for the mock trial, it's all in this packet. It is a very long document. You can print it all out at once if you want students to have the whole thing so they don't lose it, or you can just print it week by week, whatever you want. It's labeled, there's a table of contents. If you don't want to print off, the lesson content for them, you don't have to. I've also labeled the case notebook as the part where they're actually filling in the exercises. So this is probably the one part that you might want to print for your students. This might just be useful for them if they're prepping and they forgot kind of like what this is, they can go back and check through this too. So use this however much you want, however much you need from here. It'll all be on FTP. So now the final project. So that's unit 2. That's going to be during weeks 5 through 9. The last unit, lessons 10 through 13, are the last book, which is mostly technology, where we're going in the future, and the final project. So the final project, like I showed you, in week 2 and 3, they're going to be selecting their themes. That way they can also be doing their opinion editorial on the same topic. That way they're thinking about it. I've given some topics for you to pick from. You can always do anything else if your students are interested in it, if you have other suggestions for them. These are just to get the ideas going. Food waste, energy usage, climate change, those are all big topics. Eating ethically, government involvement, poverty, food justice, anything that they can think of about the food system, really they can do. So I've given some examples too. So let's say a student wants to do animal cruelty. So then during their op-ed, they can write about how animal cruelty is hidden, why we need to care, kind of like a persuasive essay there. Then their final essay and project, maybe they're looking at a new technology or system of raising animals. There are some cool technological advancements there, tracking cows, tracking the amount of feed, monitoring health that do help with animal cruelty. And then week 12 is kind of their public support campaign. So they can do raising awareness. They can talk about like why we need to care, why this system needs to go into place here. If a student wants to do like global warming, climate effects, their op-ed can be about a meal eaten at McDonald's, how the food industry, the fast food industry contributes to global warming. They'll have to research it. Their final essay and project, maybe they're looking at vertical farming and indoor farming, how it reduces, the effects of climate change. They can reduce the food miles needed to move food around. Their social media campaign in week 12, when they have to get the public support, they can campaign about food miles and convince the public, like, this is something that you need to care about. We should have vertical farming because blah, 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 things like that. If by the end of the term, they're like, I'm not interested in that topic anymore. I want to start over. I'm really interested in like this now. Totally fine. They just have to understand they're going to be starting their research from scratch. So their final presentation in weeks 10 through 12 have 3 components. Week 10 is they're writing an essay about this. This is really just to get them to research about whatever program or technology or system they would like to implement. I had a student do one about convincing her school to switch to insect protein once a week. So her project was all about researching like insect protein. The first in week 10 for her essay, she wrote about why insect protein is needed for the future. Week 11, they're going to be doing a proposed implementation plan where they have to pitch it to stakeholders. So like, how do I get support in funding for this? They can propose it to the government, a company, it's really up to them. But either way, they have to get someone to support their plan. Then week 12 is all about public support. So they might get funding for it, but then they have to convince people like to eat insects. They have to convince people that all of these plans are okay to get public buy-in. So that's week 12. So it's 10, 11, 12, where they're coming up with their idea. It can be a current technology or system already into place that they want to propose for their own community, or it can be a brand new one that they think of. So really depends on how creative your students are. And then this is kind of their project that they're going to be working towards. There is no like specifically assigned homework for these projects. It's more if they didn't finish in class, they'll need to finish it for homework. And then their final presentations will be in week 13. Okay, so lastly, just some administrative things. All of the programs that we are coming up with right now are currently in like publishing phase. So you're not going to be able to see all of the lessons all at once. Lessons 1 through 4 should be up by next week on Teachers Portal, ideally. Then you can start prepping for those classes. Lessons 5 through 8 will be rolling out in week 3. So they'll be open 2 weeks before that batch is opening. And then lessons 9 through 13 are going to come out in week 7. So again, 2 weeks before, you guys have time to prep. As of now, if you try opening it, it'll say like it's in development. So just keep that in mind as you're prepping. Other things, if you guys have any great outputs, especially in the like opinion editorial, the final presentations, any of those projects, if you have great outputs, we would love for you guys to send them in to us. You can just email me and send in your projects. Like I said, projects are a big part of Chumnam 5.0. And so what we are planning to do is also to upgrade and update the social learning portal that students have, where all of their projects go up. So anytime you film students doing their C2 projects, V1 projects, it all goes into social learning. But we want like an expanded version of that, where they should be able to upload other things onto their own projects. As of now, you know, you have a PPT, you have to record it, you have to record the students doing it. You can't upload like a movie from KineMaster directly there. Ideally, this is what the digital portfolio will be. It'll collect their iLearning, their projects, everything that they do. It is in development right now. So if you guys have anything that you would like to send to us that are great outputs that would go on the digital portfolio, that'd be really helpful for us to send to IT to have them look at like how they would put it up. And also because this will be the first term that it's rolling out in an actual STB, we'd love to see kind of what gets created, what's happening in the classes. Great, that's pretty much it that I can think of. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat, raise your hand, turn your mics on. Can't really see anyone, so.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, so really just, I guess one last thing, homework is just reading. It's like a standard master's class. They're just gonna be doing their reading homework for class. If there is additional homework, like I said, taking pictures of all the food that they eat, that is for the week 2 project. It's in the STB, it says for them to do that there. And it's just finishing whatever did not get finished in class for the final presentation. Okay, then thank you. If no one has any questions, if you do have questions, if you want to stay behind, we'll keep this open for a couple more minutes. If you have any questions, feel free. I'll give my email. So if you have anything that you think of later, feel free to email me. Feel free to email me any project outputs that you have too as well. Thank you for coming. Good luck.
Thank you, Alison.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good day.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.